I had to play against Dark in a best of 2 the other day for the World Team League, as Shopify Rebellion, the team that I am in, was playing against DKZ, Dragon Kaizi Gaming, and Dark was my opponent. Now, the way that the WTL format works is that you play game number 1 on a map predetermined, and game number 2 will be a loser's pick map. And then you can either win 2-0, you can play 1-1, or you can lose 0-2. I've done a little bit of research on Dark. I had played him the week before already in a best of 3, in which I've lost 0-2. I wasn't entirely happy with that performance. I felt like I really got slaughtered, and Dark felt extremely strong, honestly. So I spoke with Lambo, one of my teammates in Shopify Rebellion, and asked him for some words of wisdom, some advice, and he managed to get a couple of weak spots in Dark, his defense, which were the weak spots that I tried to abuse in this best of 2 series. So let's just hop into it. As you see, we're over here on, what's this map called? Royal Blood, it is. And this is generally a pretty decent map for Protoss, specifically for Glaives. It is difficult for Zerg to defend their main base and their third base versus Glaives. It is quite a short rush distance. 4 bases are easy to defend for Protoss as well due to the walling and how this base is usually set up. So I was going to play with this a little bit. A lot of Zergs are afraid of this map. Some Zergs even veto it because Glaives is so powerful on it. So what I decided to do is to open up with a fake Glaives opener. And a fake Glaives opener basically means that I start my warp gate the moment my cybernetic score finishes. This is a major tell for Zerg players around the world that this most likely is a Glaives opener, a depth Glaive opener. Once they see that, they're like, okay, if this were to be a Stargate build, that means that the Stargate would be delayed, which is generally considered inefficient. So what I did here is I open up with a warp gate and then go into a Stargate. Against a lot of Zerg players, this is fairly inconsequential because Zerg players like to play single gas responses against a Glaive opener these days. Dark, however, has a different response. He likes to get a very fast Roach Warren as well as a really quick second gas. The way he likes to defend against Glaives is by building a lot of links and then building 3 Ravagers, going for a surround on the Adept, then trying to kill them. This is a very good response and really difficult to deal with if you're playing Glaives, but it does have one weakness. A lot of the things you need to do with this particular build order, you kind of need to do them blindly before you see whether it's truly Glaive Adepts, before you see the timing on the third base. And that is different from a 1-gas defense that a lot of Zergs prefer because it's just a bit more all-around strong. Now, if I open up with a standard, or if I open up with a Warp Gate into Oracle here straight away, Warp Gate into Stargate and then an Oracle, send that Oracle across the map, my opponent will get a warning just in time. It will be like, okay, it's an Oracle after all. I don't have to build my roaches. I don't have to mine so much gas from my second gas. And there's really nothing bad going on for Dark here. So what I do as a result is I'll save up 2 Oracles at home. Now, this is obviously a very inefficient move for Protoss. I'm not harassing, I'm not scouting with my first Oracle, but the information that I have kind of tells me that if Dark scouts this particular setup, he should follow this up with 2 gas and Ravagers. And then once I fly over with 2 Oracles, he A, is not going to have a Spore in his third base, and B, he most likely already has a bunch of Ravagers prepared. So a fairly good setup. At this point, it doesn't matter that he sees my third timing. The fake has already pretty much happened. Like this, here I'm okay with him scouting everything and seeing, hey, this is what's going on, because the roaches most likely have already been constructed. I fly across the map. I see only a single queen and no Spore whatsoever. So I fly in 4, 5, 6 worker kills. Pretty much a perfect start for me. I see 1 gas, I see 2 gas and no Spore, so I get a couple more kills over here, as well as a Roach War. Now, this pretty much confirms what Lambo had told me, is that the moment you do open with a quick Warp Gate versus Dark and you properly fake that you're going for Glaives, life is going to be pretty good for you. So I'm currently really afraid of an attack out of him because he has built a lot of units, a lot of links. He has a couple of Ravagers out as well. And I'm afraid that he's just going to attack with it. And it would be very embarrassing if I just end up dying, honestly. So I'm adding a couple of batteries. I killed a lot of workers already, so life is fairly good. And I've added a 4th Oracle as well, which I now cancel. So I can get my fleet beacon and second Stargate. It's my follow-up. I kind of want this to be a... what do you call it? I want this to be a carrier follow-up. The reason for this is fairly simple. Versus Dark, I often see Protoss players get in a situation where they're ahead, or Terran players, or Zerg players. Just people get ahead against Dark. That is not... It's not that uncommon. But then they just mess it up afterwards. So what I wanted to do is to have a build or to have a setup which makes it really difficult for me to mess it up. I see the Evo chamber, so I'm pretty confident right now that he's going into a macro game. I send my adepts across the map, and as they arrive across the map, he attacks with the units that he had built earlier. This honestly was a huge blunder by me. It's just really, really stupid. I mean, I knew he had those units. I knew he wanted to do something with those units. And I just end up losing a lot of probes here, a bunch of mining time as well, and also just some control in the game. Like, the lead that I had created with the mine game earlier on has now... It has not completely disappeared, but to a large extent it has disappeared. I mean, I still have fast gases, I still have quick tech. I'm going to be capable of getting my carriers out. Back to the point about the carriers, by the way. With the carriers, it's pretty easy to kill the game. As in, nothing will happen. It will be impossible for me to attack into him, and it's impossible for him to attack into me, majority of the time. So I move out with my oracles now. You saw I was a little bit upset in the bottom right corner with my poor decision making. Really just, like, my entire goal in this series was to do nothing and to make sure that he is either forced into attacking into me, or that I eventually, with 4 or 6 carriers, practically kill him. Now, I see that he's not taking his gas, his second gas on the third base. That makes me believe that he's most likely all-inning me. And I also see a bunch of roaches moving across the map. That also makes me believe that he is all-inning me. I do have a battery in the natural. I have a robotics facility that I just finished up, and my first 2 carriers are out. So I find it difficult to believe that he's going to be capable of actually killing me here, or actually doing anything of value. Does have a lot of roaches, which is kind of frustrating. But at the same time, I mean, this really isn't so hard. I throw down a Robo Bay, so he doesn't even have roach speed yet at this point. I don't really have a lot of damage output though, and I don't have money for a sentry. And this is really painful, because this allows him to now move in towards my natural. And because I have so little damage output, despite this push never being capable of killing me, it can potentially kill a lot of my workers. And I already didn't have so many workers in my natural. I lost a bunch of workers earlier. I'm losing a lot of mining time, which means that my gateway count will not be as high later on. Not playing this all that well, honestly. The defense over here. Sentry should have been there, or I should have walled with a building. Now I do end up losing a bunch of probes for no real reason. And if I still was ahead after the last push that he did, then that lead has now disappeared for sure, basically. Yes, I do have carriers out, which is great, but I know that he has a lair because I saw Glial Reconstitution. He's most likely been building drones behind this. My worker count is, well, pretty much in the gutter. Don't have really any upgrades yet for my carriers either. If I would have +2 halfway done right now, that would be brilliant, but I only have +1 halfway done. I do have oracles, which allow me to scout, and he's pretty darn afraid of an oracle carrier attack, I guess, but he's already building spores. He has a bunch of queens out, and I'm darn afraid of a Spire roach follow-up. So despite my honestly great opener, right now I realize I'm just fairly far behind. I mean, he's on 4 bases already. I am on 3 bases. I'm not even fully saturated. He's going up to 8 gases. My goal right now is just to survive, and I kind of want him to attack into me, and that I can survive his attack. That is pretty much going to be my goal. Like, I see that he's mining so much gas, and that either indicates that he's going into Lurker, Hydra, Viper, or that he's going into many corruptors. Like, these are the 2 options. So the thing that you usually want to do here, that I'm not doing so well, is scout whether there's a hive or not. If you know whether your opponent has a hive, you can confirm whether they're all-inning you or not. Because if they don't have a hive, then most likely it's going to be a roach, corruptor, queen all-in. If they do have a hive on the way, it technically could still be a roach, corruptor, queen all-in, but you'll just have like 2-3 less corruptors than usual. So it's just some good information to get, which I honestly haven't quite gathered yet at this point. I recall during the game, as I was playing it, I still was feeling in an okay position. I believe that my lead in the early game that I had created was so large that despite my failures afterwards as a Protoss and a human being, I'm still okay-ish. Now we're going to see soon whether that's the case or not. He does have a lot of units, gets a cancel for free here on my 4th base. I don't completely mind that. Like, I'm not super tied to my fort, but him having 25 corruptors, that is something that I kind of do mind. This was actually really poor control out of him, I think. He lost way more corruptors than he should have, because the Archon got so many free shots in. Void Rays were prismatically aligned properly, so dealt a lot of damage there. But right now I only have 2 Stargates. I have, well, what is it? 5, 6 gateways or so. I'm trying to build disruptors at a 1x1 pace. So one disruptor at a time. Like, this is not great production. While he most likely is already taking a 5th, going up to 10 gases. Like, he's really exploding, and I am, well, also exploding, but in a bad way. You know, I'm blowing up, and his eco is blowing up, but in a positive way. So yeah, it's not a great situation right now. I'm just adding a couple of cannons, trying to be defensive still. Like I said, if you survive with this and you get a significant amount of carriers and void rays and archons out, you often still can do something. And me trying to take the fort base might have actually been a bit over eager here. As in a defensive posture, I might have been capable of doing just a bit more with a couple of cannons and batteries as backup. That doesn't seem to be the case. I lose the game despite killing 7-8 workers in the early game and tricking them into building Ravagers versus a Stargate opener. And I'm visibly upset because of it. Ay. Kevin. Luckily, I have the mental resilience of an Ox, who are known for their powerful mental resilience. So I decided to play a second game, and I picked Grassvan. Now, Grassvan, if you look at this map, is not necessarily a super Protoss favorite map, but it is a great map for one thing. It's a great map for professionally killing the game. And I know this sounds like a boring way to play, but I play to win. I don't play to play entertaining games. Grassvan has a beautiful wall near your third base, which makes it really easy to hold this. And I think this is genuinely a smart thing to do. If you have if you find a weak spot in your opponent that you know how to abuse, and then you understand how to basically hold on to that lead until you can do a massive push out at some point, that is a very good recipe for beating players significantly better than you. I've used this often against Maru. If I saw something in the opener where I'm like, hey, this is good. And then afterwards, you just want the game to be as stable as possible. Because if there's no chaos, it's really difficult for people to outplay you. Like, the more stable you are set up, you can sacrifice a little bit of your eco or a little bit of your potential aggression if the game just remains normal. You know, I think that is a good strategic decision against people that are known to be faster than you. This is how most people like to play against Sero or Raynor as well. You know, you want to kind of take it slow, and then if you're controlling one army versus one army, you actually can out-control them. Because yes, their army control is very good, but the main thing that they shine at is having multiple armies and controlling those, and that's not what I'm so great at. So once again, a very similar setup. It's really scary to do something like this, because Dark is obviously a proper StarCraft player. He realized that in the last game he should have been in trouble, or well, he was in trouble until I messed it up. And I was wondering at the start of this game, like, hey, is he going to switch something up? Is he going to play different here, or is he going to stick with his standard responses? It's kind of weird to play a similar mind game twice in a row, but I did feel like the Dark tends to be a little bit stubborn, and especially because he won that last game, I thought it was unlikely he would change too much. Like, he might play it a little bit more safe, and he might be more aware of something being a bit off. Like, hey, that warp in is a bit late, or hey, the movement makes no sense. He might be a bit safer with his queen positioning as well. Here I saw 2 links going across the map, as only 2 changed my probe. And that's actually kind of a scary thing in this case, I think. So I didn't want to send it out, because here he actually made a small adaptation rather than trying to not scout at all. Here he really was keen on getting a scout in. And we see his Overlord is already poking in as well, which I thought was kind of a wild move. So I do have a Stalker as my second unit, and losing an Overlord this early in the game is super expensive. It's not so bad if you lose it to Protoss' third unit, but losing it to the second unit actually, for whatever reason, is really expensive for Zerg and kind of messes with the build order in a way where losing it to the third gateway unit doesn't as much. So yeah, he doesn't really commit with it, will take a bit of damage. This actually makes me feel really good about everything. He has no information. We're basically the exact same situation as last game, and he'll need to gamble now. Like, hey, do I want to go for my 2 gas again And a fun little note, by the way, to add is that last time I played against him, I played a glaive opener every single time. And now, it didn't go so great for me, but I mean, he still knew that I liked glaive openers. And in the past few months, I have been playing a lot of glaive openers. So this mind game coming out of me actually makes some sense. Now, just a little bit of background info. Saving up both of these oracles once again. And once more, I'm really trying to kind of deny any scouting here. I don't want him to see my oracle move out. I don't want him to see, you know, that my third base going down ideally, but there's not so much you can do about that. And just kind of clearing the path. So I move out a bit on the map, and I take double gases. Oh, there we go, double gases and triple oracles. Now, the reason why I get the third oracle is because I'm really afraid of a counterattack. Playing double oracle would have been really sick, but also kind of hard to do. I check. There is a spore this time, but I also see roaches popping out. So he kind of went middle of the road here, like getting some roaches, but at the same time still going for a spore. So if I had played glaives, his defense would have been significantly worse. You lose a lot of money if you build an early spore against glaives. But at least it's a little bit of added safety. He still built the roaches though, and most likely did get his 2 gases. So I'm still feeling somewhat okay. He goes in with the counterattack. I just warp in some stalkers. Rather than going for the Fleet Beacon Stargate setup, second Stargate and Fleet Beacon setup that I did last time, I'm going for a slightly different setup here with more stalkers and trying to rush into Storm. Decide to keep 1 oracle at home to just deal with any Ling run bys, and then use 2 oracles to go for any potential harassment. I think this is generally a good call. My lead isn't quite as big as it was in the last game, if we can even speak of much of a lead, but it still feels somewhat nice for me. You know, he's not in a super comfortable position here. I do end up killing a couple of drones. One of the things I've noticed with Dark, if you compare him with the European Zergs, is that I think his defense against oracles is actually significantly worse. And specifically, like his overlord position seems a little bit lackluster as well. And I think it's because Dark tends to play a slightly different style where his games are a lot less structured. Like he thrives in chaos, and his own playstyle, his own early game tends to be a little bit more chaotic as well, it feels like, as a result. Like this type of damage that I'm dealing here against the drones, I find that really unlikely to get something like that against Raynor or Cerro or Lambo or Laser. I did scout a Nidus network here, by the way. This is a build that I was aware of that he did. So I'm like, okay, if you're gonna Nidus network, like if his early game didn't go super proper, he often would go Nidus. So I'm seeing this Overseer. I do get 3 Queens here for free as well, and I'm adding a lot of static defense. I already had 2 of those Stalkers in position in the main base because I knew this was kind of inevitable, that he was gonna go in there as well. Void Ray shows up, and boom, just like that, we take out that Nidus. Now at this point I've killed 2 Nidus networks, so all I really need to do is make sure that I don't fall behind economically. I'm taking my gas 5 and 6, and I can add my Templar Archives. It's really unlikely for people to go with the 3rd Nidus, and even if he did, I already have my cannons done. I have a lot of gateways for Stalker production, and yeah, I killed 3 Queens as well, so my air units are just going to be super useful here. Now I actually do feel very far ahead, and my plan once again is to kind of slow down the game, make sure that not too much happens. I have +1 on my Stalkers. I can move across the map, force out more units, deny my opponent's creep while expanding myself. And this map makes it really easy to kind of wall off this area. And once you have that area walled off, the only way he can run by is going through the very bottom. And that is just really difficult to set up for Zerg. So the moment you're basically set up like this, it feels super comfortable as Protoss. Like you can move out without having to really worry about any type of run by. You can warp in Templar at home. You can just start building probes towards your fort base. I get a couple of cannons there as well. And if a toss manages to survive on 8 gas without taking any damage after a superior early game, this is often a really bad situation for the Zerg. So I'm just getting a battery in my main base because I'm kind of afraid of Muta. I haven't quite scouted his fort base yet. I haven't gotten a scout in on his main in a while either. I see a 7th gas. but no 8 gas. For Muta builds, usually you go up to 8 gas because you need every single gas. So right now my mind is either on Ravager, Ling Bane into Hive, or it's going to be Lurker, Roach. And knowing what I know about Dark, I am leaning towards Lurker, Roach. And then seeing 17 Ravagers and a crap ton of Roaches, I pretty much fall in the direction. If I was leaning before, I have now fallen into the direction of Roach Lurker. And I immediately, as a result, go into my Skytoss transition and add a 5th base. This seems risky, because I know a lot of people end up dying against Lurkers and other things. A little bit surprised, by the way, that the Hive is this quick. I was like, man, I felt like I was further ahead than this, but whatever. Zerg's gonna Zerg. One of the things I see people do against Ravager, Roach, Lurker is they'll go for a very heavy gate push and try to kill the Zerg. And the moment they fail, they'll get their 5th base and then they do their transition. I often feel like keeping map control, having a prism on the map and having run-bys prepared while teching into carriers is a superior way. Zerg in that case, because you're on the map, is still forced to warp in a lot of lurkers, or sorry, to transform, not warp in. If you could warp in lurkers, that'd be proper broken. Prism in the main base, 7 lurkers. GG Terran. Oh, that would be sick. Where was I? Ah, right. They're still forced to use the gas on lurkers, so they can't transition into spires that fast. And you are getting units that he isn't countering yet, which is great. And you have a fast 5th base, which can't really be easily attacked. Your opponent is getting range upgrades, most likely, and it's difficult to run by with range units. So your 5th base is pretty much secure. You have counterattack possibilities. If he pushes back your main army, you go in with those. It's hard to split your army when you're playing lurkers. It's especially hard to split your army with lurkers if you're also going for a high drone count, which I think Dark isn't necessarily doing here. I think he's maybe like 80 drones or so. It's not super. It's not like 95. The reason why I'm getting cannons in the main base is because I know I am not the greatest player in the world here. Okay? I think technically you shouldn't really want cannons in your main base, but I know that Dark likes to build Niduses there, especially versus worse players. And I'm like, this would be a really stupid way to lose the game. Like, I feel like I'm winning at this point. I am ahead. I want to keep this lead. So if I just build cannons in my main base... so yeah, here comes the first Nidus. I luckily was in position with 1 carrier. And I actually did spot it, so that also helps in dealing with it. But yeah, if I just have these dudes in my main base, then I don't have to look at it anymore. The cannons will take care of it. And whenever you have something that can... Like, attention is a resource, of course. And especially if you know you're worse than your opponent, or you have less attentional... you know, the less of the resource called attention, then yeah, I think it's not a bad thing to kind of offload that onto other things. Here, he almost really caught me. Might have been a bit too forward with my army there. Kind of got semi-surrounded. But this does open up a lot of supply for me, which is cool because it allows me to continue producing carriers at a high pace. I find his Nidus once more. And these lurker run-bys are scary if you're completely unprepared. But all my bases have so many cannons already ready, so I don't really feel like they're... I can calmly deal with this. Like, run-bys and side attacks and just anything, like small forces, like multitasking, is not so hard to deal with if you can deal with it in a very calm manner. If you already have... Like, if you're mentally prepared, but also physically prepared. So you have like some cannon set up, maybe you have a Templar at 2 out of 3 bases. You don't have to worry about every base anymore. Like, I don't have to worry about my 3rd. I don't have to worry about my 4th. My main is secure. So the multitasking really is just going to be aimed at the 1 base where he's attacking. I don't have to split off anything preemptively anywhere else. So that makes it super easy for me to deal with these side Niduses. I'm in complete control of this game right now. It doesn't necessarily feel like it, because I don't have insane map control, but he hardly has any creep. We're on an even base count, and I think the upgrades for my air units are significantly better than his air units. I have carriers. I don't even think he is working towards Corruptors yet, or Brood Lords. So yeah, I'm feeling very good. And once again, just very calm. I think just playing calm in general is a good way to approach it. Whenever you're ahead. Just trying to really kill the game. I love doing that in general. It does make you one of the most boring players to watch. You need to do something else to make up for it, you know? You need to make funny faces, raise your eyebrows whenever something happens. Maybe type something in the chat, otherwise people will start hating you. There's a trade-off there. So I hit both of the Vipers with my feedback as I'm denying his 5th base. I see he's using Microbial Shroud. But all of his anti-air right now is basically just Viper, Spore, and Infestor. So there's no real anti-air that can fight. All of these units are just for pick-offs, basically, right? He wants to try and hit a fungal, then pick off one carrier, tries to hit an abduct, and then try to pick off a carrier. Like, all of these things, they're not... He can't fight me right now. I have a superior air force. So that allows me to have complete map control at this point now. It's not the world's greatest micro, as I am kind of dealing with a bit of a push over here, or a bit of an attack over here. These salads are not doing very much of anything. He adds a Nidus. What you gonna do with this Nidus, buddy? I'm very curious. He just runs away with his units in the Nidus. Very odd move. I mean, you could have just ran away in general. There was just one carrier there. I'm not sure if a Nidus was necessary, but I mean, Dark's gonna do what Dark's gotta do, you know? You can't hate the guy. 6 base for me is going up. One of the things that's really important against lurker defensive setups is that you out-expand your opponent with lots of cannons. Because the lurker multitask can be quite hard to deal with, but it's very, very hard for Zerg to spread themselves too thin. So the topside base, where my zealots are walking right now, we might get a little bit of vision on it in a bit. I don't think we will. Not looking at it. That base can't ever be taken by him. It's really important that that's not the case. And also the bottom base, like basically the 6 o'clock, he should not be allowed to take it until he has a sufficient corruptor force and maybe even some brute lords as well. Because that is the end game army for Zerg, right? This is an army that Dark really needs to get rid of. And he needs to get rid of it in a somewhat efficient manner. Because he's invested crap ton of resources into the lurkers, into the infestors, into the hydras. Like, you can't just lose everything here and be like, oh, that's fine. So you can just throw it into a cannon wall. No, like, he needs to actually trade with it. And I know that. And he wants to trade them out one by one, so he can easily replace them one by one. And I want a massive fight where I can kill his entire army, get a very good trade, and then pretty much take it from there. I get a couple of decent revelations here, and I just start taking out these spores, because he's out of position. It's really difficult for him to always be in position with lurkers, to always be in position with queens and infestors. I'm getting quite some damage here, but queens apparently they have infinite health, and they can transfuse each other. In Microbial Shroud, they're actually quite strong. Running out of storms. That was a pretty mad fight, honestly. I had not expected that to go so well for him. I thought I could almost just move straight into him. As I was just checking my interceptor count. Interceptor count is shown where my camera is right now. So you guys can't see it, but I could see it. That's why sometimes I just control click all of my carriers to make sure they have enough interceptors. You don't want to fight when you have like half of your interceptors aren't there. And now just going in over here, taking out an extractor, and maybe even trying to go for something else. It's really scary because the way that the mothership moves is the movement path of the mothership is the worst movement path in the entire game, right? Like, it's just so stupid. It is slow. Whenever it tries to accelerate to a point, it first has to make like a semicircle. It never just goes in a straight line. Like when it turns around, it's just a garbage unit really for movement. It's so easy to lose. So I probably should just have it behind the rest of my army. I'm not sure why I actually keep it in the same control group. That seems to me like a bit of a mistake. It's, yeah, like I said, I'm just really trying to deny my opponent's spores and trying to deny his ability to go towards the top. Now, here's a couple of lurkers that are in position, but if it's just lurkers without Microbial Shroud, without Vipers, my carriers can actually take it out at a pretty high pace. Like, that's not much of an issue, you know? And Immortals are actually fairly good as well against lurkers. You shouldn't forget about that. Like, if lurkers are just isolated by themselves, yeah, Immortals are pretty good. So here he comes in with a cheeky little Nidus Worm. I immediately respond to it. That's important. I have a Templar there already idling. I get every single feedback unit. What's that what they're called? The Viper. Almost every single Viper I get at least. We're continuing our path to sheer domination. Now, he did go invisible as I lost some of my detection on the low ground. I clear these lurkers. And the funny thing here is that that last lurker on burrowing actually was not necessary, because I didn't have any detection with me, so he could have had it, but he didn't know. because there still was, I think, a revelation from an oracle on it as he unburrowed. So it's a bit unlucky for him, but very funny for me, of course. Yeah. Now I've broken this area, technically. His topside base on the right, the one that is most likely his 6th base, can't be defended anymore. That's a huge deal, because that means I'm denying him a mining base, while I already have a 7th on the way, pretty much. So he feels very forced to make a move at this point, right? This base is really important for him. If he doesn't get that base, he's in major trouble. I just store my own mothership there for a second after it gets abducted, as motherships always do. Do rebuild it immediately, because I think the mothership is probably one of the best tools that Protoss has in general. Here I get a lot of these infestors, and he's not really paying attention. He's just kind of standing there as I target down some of these Vipers as well. Don't have a lot of ground forces anymore, but he really has no end there. Like, I'm looking at this army and I'm thinking, wait, how scary is this really? I have vision on all of his infestors. He can't neural me. Yes, I'm going to lose all of my Templars to these stupid Ultras, but where's your anti-air? Just add 2 robotics facilities. I'm like, well, I can just start targeting down units now, like expensive casters. I might lose a bunch of interceptors, but if I can kill your gas units, I'm kind of okay with it here. And this really felt like his Hail Mary play. I'm like, wait, he's not even mining gas here. Let me just start taking stuff down. And one of the important things right now is to see what's coming out of the eggs. Is to see what's coming out of the larva. If it's a lot of corruptors, you could say, hey, I want to go back home. But if it's infestors, you probably want to continue fighting. Infestors don't pop with a neural parasite, so they're not an immediate threat to you. You know, he's trying to build up to an army that can beat you maybe in a minute from now. And then you don't want him to get there. But the moment you start seeing a lot of corruptors pop out, you probably do want to think like, hey, could he possibly build like 17 or 25 corruptors right now? And do I maybe need to, teleport back home at some point? And right now, I'm not really seeing that. Like, I'm seeing some corruptors, but this is not a huge corruptor count. On top of that, his upgrades, as I clicked them, actually looked really weak. I think he had 1-1 upgrades at this point. So I'm just completely destroying him. I think I have 3-2 currently on my carriers, or maybe 2-2. I'm not entirely sure. And I'm just building Void Rays, adding them in. A, because they're great against Lurkers and Ultras, and B, because they're absolutely fantastic against Corruptors. GG gets played, and I am very happy because I managed to actually win a point for my team, which doesn't happen very often. All right. That's going to be it for me today. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you did enjoy it. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.